Hey there guys, in this video I'm just going to be showing you how I made my Faze intro. I'm just going to be going over how to break it down, how I did all the color correction, all of that stuff. So we're going to be using Photoshop, Cinema 4D and After Effects. So we're going to jump straight into this one and let's get started. So let's go ahead, open up Photoshop, and in here this is where I have my logo already in place. And so basically to get the work path, what I did, I was just going to hit Control and click on the little thumbnail of the layer, and that's just going to select everything. We'll go to our selection tool and we're just going to hold Alt, and I'm just going to get rid of this little TM watermark down here. And once that's done, I'm going to right click, go to Make Work Path, and we'll set it to maybe 0.9 tolerance and hit OK. And you'll see when we hide our layer using the little eye symbol, we now have our work path of our logo. And we're just going to go to File, Export, Path to Illustrator. And then within here, we're just going to save out our work path. So let's go ahead and find where we can do it. Save it into here. Call it logo work path. And that is as easy as that. Now we're going to jump straight into Cinema 4D. So here we are inside of Cinema 4D, and we're just going to go ahead and open up that logo work path that we recently made. So let's go ahead and find it. It's around here somewhere. Here it is, the logo work path. Make sure the scale is set to 1, we'll hit OK. And you'll see that this has now imported our logo that we exported in Photoshop. Now if we go ahead and take a look at the original, which I have open here, you can see that we have a bunch of different split up scenes here. So we'll just come out of our camera, and you'll see that our logo has been fragmented into a bunch of different pieces. And then when you have this final camera animation, you can see that we fly through it. Now to create that effect, let's go back to our original scene file here. And what we need to do is we need to sweep our logo. So we'll go over to the Hypernubs bit here, we'll select a sweep, and we'll also go to our Spleens tab and we're just going to select a circle. Now we'll put the logo path in and a circle on top of our logo. And we're just going to scale our circle down to something that looks suitable to you, so we'll maybe do around 7, or maybe 6. And we now have our logo. But again, when we go back to our original, you can see that it's split up into different pieces. Now to do that is really simple. So in this scene file here, we're going to go to our sweep, and all we need to play around with is the start and end growth. So you see when we increase these up, we're actually splitting the logo up. Now to create the effect of multiple ones, all I did was maybe get a random one like that. And then we're going to hold Control and drag down on our sweep. And then we're just going to go ahead and play around with the start and end growth, and you'll see that we're creating different parts of the logo. And we'll maybe connect it up here. Again, hold Control and duplicate it there. And you just keep going around until you get something comfortable. Duplicate again. Keep playing around with the start and end growth, and you can make them as big or as little as you want. Now I'm just going to speed forward through this bit just so you can see how I did it. We'll maybe go back to here. Now once I've done this, I'll catch up with you. And you'll see now that we have now completed our full logo again. Apart from now, we've got a bunch of different segments in it. Now what we want to do is we want to split it up into multiple pieces like this. Now that's again easy to do. So we're just going to go ahead, go to MoGraph and Fracture. And we're just going to click on the top sweep, hold Shift and click on the bottom one, and we're just going to highlight all of them and put them into the fracture object. Now with the fracture object selected, we can go to MoGraph Effector, and we can do a random effector. And you see this is going to break it up into multiple pieces. But for our parameters, we don't want to affect the X position, so we'll hit 0 on that, or the Y position, we'll hit 0. And in fact, we just want to increase our Z position. So you see it's going to increase up in the Z space. Like so. So you see we are now getting something similar to our original scene here. So once this is done, what I did in the original, if we go back to our camera object, to try and really show my logo rather than having just the different pieces, I actually duplicated the fracture object here, and you'll see at the end if we quickly team render this out. you'll see that we actually have our main logo here, which is actually quite visible. And if we turn this off, turn off the render as well, and if we render that out, you'll see by adding this duplicate logo, we are definitely more able to see it, and it just adds that nice sort of impacting touch to the final video. So let's go ahead and do that to our other scene file here. What we're going to do is going to hold Control, click on our fracture, and we're just going to drag it down. And what we're going to do to this one is also duplicate our random. And back on our duplicated fracture, we're going to delete that original random. We're going to add our new duplicated random. And you'll see that nothing has actually changed, but if we go to this effector, we're just going to bring this in a little bit. Like so. And if we call this logo, and we'll call this pieces. And if we go to our logo, and make sure our anchor point is on, and we're just going to reposition the anchor point to the center of the logo. So we'll go up here. Make sure it's in the center of the logo, and we'll come off our anchor point here, and we can hit the scaling option up here, or T on the keyboard, and we're just going to scale it down into the middle. And you'll see now we've now got our more visible logo in the middle. And it's up to you how much you want to split this apart. But now we're getting something similar to this. Next, what we need to do is position our camera. So we'll go to the camera option, we'll grab a new camera, and we'll hit the little title safe, and we're just going to try and position this in the center of our logo. So now we're going to work on some animation and camera techniques. So we'll grab our camera. Now the way I did it in the original example is I grabbed a spline. So we'll do a linear spline. And we're just going to go to our 4 views using the middle mouse button. Go to our top view, and I'm just going to create a spline all the way through the center of our pieces, like so. And you'll see that's made our new spline here, and we're going to go back to our original, and we're just going to position it up into the center of our logo by make sure you're on object mode. And we're going to position it in the center of our pieces. Now we want the camera to follow along the path of the spline. So we'll go to Camera, Cinema 4D tags, Align to Spline. And once that tag is on, we're going to drag our spline into the spline path. And you'll see if we go onto the tag, we can play around with the position. And you'll see that we are now traveling through, but it's not fully centered. So let's grab our camera and let's just center it up. And again, go back to the tag, and you can play with the percentage, and you'll see now we are traveling through the logo. So let's do some animation. We'll go to frame 0, set the position on 0%, go to frame 100, and we'll increase it up to 100% like so, and hit the stopwatch there. So now we have some basic animation like so, but we also want to add some rotation. So let's come out of our camera, go back to frame 0, and we're going to grab the rotation tool, and let's hold shift and maybe move it around 180 degrees, and again hit the stopwatch. Look through our camera, and now you'll see when we play through, we need to actually go back to our camera, and at the frame 100 we're going to position it back round from 180, and again hit the stopwatch. So you'll see now when we fly through here, we're also getting some nice rotation as well. But we're also going to want to animate our pieces. So let's go to our first random effector, go to frame 0, and we can increase our Z position. Maybe around 4000, hit the little stopwatch, make sure it turns red. Go to maybe frame 110, and we're just going to move this down slightly to maybe 2000, again hit the stopwatch, and we'll do the same for our second random effector. So go frame 0, increase this up to maybe 400, hit the stopwatch, go forward a couple frames to 105, and we're going to increase this down to maybe -400, and again hit the stopwatch. So you'll see now, as well as the camera movement, we've also got some animation on our pieces. If we come out of the camera, you'll see this is the overall animation that I did. Go back into the camera. Now the last thing to do is some texturing. So we'll go to our original one here. Now I wanted to go for like a neon glowing style sort of theme, so if we quickly just render this out, you see we got some nice vivid greens and then some dark shiny greys and also a bit of blue in there. And I just thought this looked fairly nice, so let's go ahead. Actually, let's do something a bit different for this one. Let's make some different colors. So we'll go down here, we'll make a new material. And let's go for a red kind of color. Maybe a reddy orange color. Hit OK. Also add it on the luminance channel. Choose a reddy orange color. And then let's just tone this down slightly. And again, what I did on the original is that I added a glow, but really faintly, so we'll just make sure that's ticked on. The inner strength maybe around 40%, and the outer strength to maybe 80%. And what we can do is go to our pieces fracture object, and we can just position this onto a variety of pieces, hold control, and we'll just dot this around, just like so. We'll hit control again and duplicate this material, and let's make a different color. Maybe a, what should we go for? Maybe a purpley blue color. Make sure to change it on the luminance. We'll go for a purpley blue. And again, we'll dot this around on the different pieces. Maybe one more color. Again, hold control and click and drag. And let's go for a teal blue kind of color like that. And we'll just position this on the last couple pieces. So if you now, when we render this out, we're getting some nice funky colors, and we'll just increase our resolution and size. So that's just going to render out nicely like that. And we've also got some nice glowing happening around. Now the last thing we need to do is texture our middle logo, and we want this one to stand out, so make sure you have a nice brightly lit color which is different from the rest. So we can do, what can we do? We can do a really nice green color, I guess. Make sure it's nice and bright to stand out. And we'll increase the luminance, and actually let's also increase the glow on this one, so the inner strength maybe 70 and the outer strength to 300 or 200, and we'll see how that looks, and we'll just add that to our logo, that one there. Render this out, and you'll see now we're starting to get some nice colourful abstract looking effect here. And when we render it through, let's maybe render out this frame here, just to make sure everything is looking okay. And you see this is very brightly fun, funky coloured. You can do any colours you want, just to make sure, you know, it fits your style or your theme or whatever you're going for. But that's looking good. So after that was done, I just went ahead and rendered that out. So let's have a look at the render settings. 1920 by 1080, we'll do all frames, save it as TIFF PSD layers, and we're also going to check the alpha channel. That all looks good, make sure object glow is on, and that's all good to go. So once that's done, let's go into After Effects and do some color correction and text and all that stuff. So here we are inside After Effects, and this is how the original came out. If we scrub through here, we've got some nice glowing and some particles and all that stuff. And what I thought we'd do is just break down this original scene file, and I'll take you through each step. So I started by importing our rendered logo, and if we have a look at this, this is how it looked in the end. And let's go into this composition here. So I started with our rendered footage. Let's have a look at the effects. I added a CC radial blur just to get some nice zooming sort of motion blur happening. And if we hit U on the keyboard, you can see the keyframes here. We started with the amount of 15. And you'll see. And then I keyframed it down to 0 over time. So now we're getting some nice motion blur happening right at the start. Next up, I added some more glows and overlays here. So what I did was I duplicated this layer here, scaled it up and positioned it in the middle. I also blurred it out slightly. So you'll see there it is. And this just adds some nice overlaying abstract look to it, and I also added some curves and a hue saturation. And you see now when we scrub through, it just sort of fills in the blank spaces like so. And next up, again to emphasize our logo at the end, if we quickly turn this on, you'll see it there. We'll just go to our logo. I just animated the opacity on over time, and this just means we're more able to see our logo at the end, just to make sure we get our branding across. Next was some text, which I was Faze Georgiiou. And if we go to our switches mode, I made it a 3D layer, and I animated the position on and off, so the position was really far forward out of the way. And over time I animated it on backwards in Z space like so. And I also, if we go to our rotation, animated the Z rotation from 50. And you see when it comes on here, it just animates down to 0 just to follow along with the flow of the animation. And then I checked the motion blur for the layer and also the composition. And so that was it pretty much for this composition. I added the subtext, which is the official motion designer for the Faze clan. And there's nothing too fancy here. I just faded it on using T, or for opacity, and that just fades on over time. So once that was done, I pre-composed that whole layer. And if we go back to this composition, this is where most of the color correction and the particles and everything was done. So I started with a plain background, that composition on top. I then added some scratches over the top just to get some nice particles effect. So if we turn our curves off, and we also change it back to normal, this is what the original looked like. I put it onto 10%, changed the transfer mode to vivid light, if I can find it. Right there. And then I also added some curves just to sort of fade it out a little bit more. Next I added some nice light glows towards the middle, which is really easy to do. It's a simple layer with a mask, so we can just delete the mask and we'll change it back to normal. This is the original layer. I changed it to soft light, and then I also put a circular mask and feathered it out in the center of the composition. I did this a few times to repeat the process, so I added another one, a brighter one, and another one at the bottom just to sort of push it upwards a little bit. Next was some light rays, and if we hit U for our keyframes, if we zoom through here, you can see I animated the intensity over time, and this just adds a nice glow towards the middle of the logo and all the text and everything. I've then got some noise just to break it apart and make it look a little bit more organic. And if we go inside this noise layer, I just duplicated the round feathered circle, added a fractal noise. Under the evolution I hit Alt, click on our stopwatch, and that brings us to here, and that lets us type in an expression. I just typed in time times 30, and that's just going to animate it continuously like so. I also tinted it this nice bluey teal colour to follow along with the theme of the logo. Next was some sharpen, just to add a bit of sharp and harshness throughout the entire composition. And next was the final CC color correction layer. So if we turn this on, this does a lot here, so let's break this down one by one. So I started with a curve. Under the RGB I added a S curve to add a lot of contrast. I also increased our blacks to add a bit more grey, And then I went to our blue channels and added a whole bunch of blue into there. And sort of decrease the highlights. So we're getting this nice greeny tint towards the middle. Under our green layer, again I did a slight S-curve, and also our red layer, added a bit of red highlights in there. And that was it for the curves. Next we've got a glow, which does a lot. And we can play around with this, add some nice intensity. Make sure it's not too overpowering though. That's nice and done there. Next we have a color balance again, just to add some more blue throughout the entire composition. We then added a film grain overall, which adds some really nice quality features to it. And then finally a tint, with it being a dark blue to a sort of pale orange color. And the amount of tint is around 20%, just so it's not too overpowering again. Next was a letterbox, so if we just go ahead and turn this on, this just gives it that cinematic effect. Next we have a brightness and contrast adjustment layer, and this is what fades out our composition. So if we scrub through here, you'll see over time, at the start we have brightness and contrast set to 0, but after about a second we decrease the brightness and increase the contrast, and you'll see this just gives us nice cinematic fading out. Finally, we also have a proper fade out, so we'll hit U on this layer. And this is just a black solid layer with the opacity of fading from 0% keyframed into 100% over time. And you see now when we scrub through this, all our effects have come together and created this really nice looking video. Now, one last thing I like to do is I pre-compose this entire composition here. And then what I did, I duplicated it 3 times from red, green and blue. And this is a tutorial I've done before called the RGB Split tutorial. And what I did, I just added levels onto each one of these layers and I split the channels out. So you'll see we have a red layer, a green layer and a blue layer. And together, I just offset them slightly to see you'll get this nice chromatic abrasion look here. And if you just do it slightly, you see if we increase the resolution up here, you'll see we have some nice distortion and chromatic abrasion happening towards the edge of the text and the video. So that's pretty much an overall breakdown of how I did this Faze intro for my Faze Georgiiou recruitment video. There's some nice particles and glows happening. Overall, I like the color correction, the text and everything looks really great. But yeah, I hope this video helped you out. I hope you learned some new things. Be sure to keep requesting all the tutorials and everything like that. Yeah, make sure to give this video a like. And yeah, that's it. Again, thank you guys. Thank you for all the support that you give me, everything like that. And I'll speak to you guys soon. Bye guys.